everybody. This is Isaiah Colton with another podcast episode called Sales and Marketing Secrets. And today is a special edition, The Real Entrepreneur. I am doing as many podcasts, up to two a day, talking to some of my favorite entrepreneurs in the real estate industry. Some are actually in real estate, some service the real estate industry. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing you their backstories, so you can hear firsthand how they've gotten real estate, who they've impacted, what the successes they've had, and more importantly, kind of ending off a little bit about what to do in the shifting market. And the feedback we have gotten has been unbelievable with some of the stories that we're telling. And I am excited for today's guest, Mr. Beatty Carmichael, who I consider a peer in the marketing space. And Beatty is a master at a lot of different forms of marketing, but particularly offline marketing. I have tremendous respect for what he's done in the postcard space. So welcome to the podcast, Beatty.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad to be here, Isaiah.
Awesome. Folks, for those of you that haven't tuned into one of these podcasts with this series I'm doing called Real Entrepreneur, these are raw and real stories. We don't filter anything. I ask questions, and we're going to continue with that today. And so, Beatty, better watch out. So, Beatty, tell us your backstory and how you ended up servicing the real estate community.
Short story. My dad was a surgeon. Like to brag on him. His specialty was the carotid artery. He was the best in the nation, better than Mayo Clinic. Wow. And we had a great lifestyle, except he never participated. So he was always working. Average week was probably 80 hours a week. And when I got to college, I decided I didn't want any of that. I wanted the income, but not the lifestyle. And I started learning over the years about the concept of recurring income, where you can, as it played out in marketing, how you could run a marketing piece, and if it worked, you just continue to repeat that same piece in multiple areas, and your income grows, but you don't work any harder. Okay, it's a scalability of a system, and so that caught me real excitedly. I actually got involved in college with Amway, for those people old enough to know what Amway is. And because I wanted to be a millionaire before I graduated, that did not happen. And but what it did is it taught me a number of things that I then used in this business. Ultimately, I left that, got involved with a business partner. We started to do telemarketing, automated telemarketing to local homeowners to advertise restaurants, like the pizza special for the weekend. And it was short-lived because you'd have to make a sale, run the ads, and then you got to make the sale again. Right. But then we got involved with Excel Communications, which was another MLM, with telephone services. And at that time, we were experimenting with a voicemail that you could use to generate prospects, where most people had a hard time selling a prospect on, take a look at this new business idea. So we came up with a voicemail, and the idea is, hey, call this voicemail and they'll explain what's going on. If you like it, then let's talk. We perfected that to a degree. I left the business, my business partner kept it. He came back to me about a year later to create that same type of message, but we'd advanced it further and launched this concept we call Sizzle Line. I actually registered the mark Sizzle Line. And for those who may have, if that rings a bell, but what it was is a 3-minute message with about 2 or 2.5 minutes of testimonials. And it was a promotional advertising message that you would just send people to, run in a newspaper. This is back before the internet, things of that sort. And for the first 15 years, we serviced home business opportunity owners in helping them find prospects to grow their business. So it's a professional to a consumer. And we had some great success. With the crisis, many of the older agents will recognize 2008 and 2009. You had this credit crunch and credit crisis. That knocked us for a loop. And then in 2012, we retooled. using the same marketing concepts and focus exclusively on real estate. So the pattern has always been, what can you do that can replicate and continue to produce results and generate prospects in the consumer industry? And that's how we got to what we do now with Agent Dominator.
Yeah, and
Generating
I think that's a
sales.
really important note to make. One of the things I caught in your story is that there's a big difference between chasing after business and attracting it.
Yeah.
Big difference. And I'm not saying that, and as a real estate professional, you're not going to be in a position where you need to follow up, but the power of marketing going ahead of your sales efforts versus just cold calling or door knocking or any of those is the tremendous leverage that you can get from it. Right. So like if I have a pool of people that have been warmed up and that are either contacting me, and I can follow up with a smaller group of people rather than this giant pool of people I have no idea what's going on with either my database or in a circle prospecting area or whatever it may be. I think that's the biggest shift I think that more and more agents need to take. And that's what I heard is like, that's what you constantly focus on.
Well, it's that, and it's the repetition. You can only scale something that doesn't require your time.
Right.
And so if you can develop a process that drives in the business that you're looking for, then it's what I call a prospect faucet. You just turn the faucet on more if you want more of it. And when you've got enough, you close the faucet back off. And that is, that's the thread of what drives me in business and how I got started.
That's great.
My dad never had it. He was driven by hours. Can I tell a story of my first real estate client?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because this falls in line with this. So my dad is like most real estate agents, right? 24/7 pretty much, and never no time off. So my first real estate client is a guy named Stuart. When I met him, he was doing 120 transactions a year, personal production.
Wow.
on 35 hours a week. He worked Monday through Thursday. He rarely worked evenings, and he never worked weekends. And I was blown away with it. And I said, how do you do it? He said, well, he has this marketing system that had been perfected, and he just turns it on and runs it. And then when COVID hit, and everything crashes down, we were talking about going through these cycles. And it's real interesting. He said, Beatty, and he's been in selling for 40 years. So he goes back to Jimmy Carter days with the high interest rates. And he said, Beatty, I've been through every single significant market shift in 40 years. He said, every time the market has shifted, I make more money going into the market, and I make multiple times more money coming out
of it. Yeah.
And I asked him how. He said that you just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah. Stay consistent.
Staying consistent. That's exactly right.
Keep honing in your marketing machine, right?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, what a powerful story. That's really cool. One of the things that I was thinking about, leading up to our podcast is kind of, the world of entrepreneurship and the things that we have to go through. And I think one of the things that's important is sometimes the things that we do are self-inflicted wounds, but then sometimes, like you said, the market just slaps you, or something comes out of the blue that you feel like is kind of out of your control. And I'd like to kind of just ask you, like, when you've kind of like on a personal level been going through those things, how do you process transition, or like getting through that transition, and what gets you through it? How do you work through that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it may be?
Let me make sure I've got your question framed. Are you saying like when the credit crisis hit? By the way, we lost 2/3 of our business in 3 months or something like that. I forget the exact numbers.
Yeah,
But
because
how
I
do you
mean,
process on that?
right, because agents are some agents are going through that,
Yeah,
meaning like they're experiencing something that's different. They're all different levels. For some it's more dramatic, but it's things are different for them, right?
yeah.
And I think your story of having to go through something that traumatic, I think would be powerful for them to hear.
Yeah, so if you take the spiritual part out of it, we can talk on there if you want to go in there. But
Yeah.
just looking at the business side of things, I remember I was sitting at a pretty small group meeting, like 12 people,
Yeah.
with the past CEO of Porsche. His name is Peter Schutz. And he was talking about transitions. And this predated my transition by a couple of years. So this was pretty fresh. And he said, when you have to make a transition, when business changes or the market changes,
Yep.
go back to what made you great. And so as we hit this shift in the 2008, 2009, in that time frame, I started looking at what made us great, because what happened when we started this business in '97, we hit $350,000 a month revenue in 18 months.
Wow.
And from zero, I mean, we just skyrocketed. And we took we had one client at the time, and we generated just tons of new business for them. I think it was like $5 million a month of new sales revenues every month within about a 2-year period.
And that's incredible.
So we look back and we said, what made us great? Because over that period of time, what happens a lot of times is, you start to crash, you start to become less focused, you start to be jack of many, master of none, right?
Easy to do.
And so, so we went back and said, what made us great was helping the professional identify the consumer prospect.
Yeah.
At that time, we had grown our britches a lot, and we try to be all things to all people. And we were competing in areas that we would never be the best at. And if you've ever read the book, Good to Great, one of the big statements that they make is this thing they call the hedgehog concept, and or the hedgehog principle is, and it basically says, what can you be number one in? And don't go anywhere else if you can't be number one in it. And we were playing the other man's game for many years. And playing the other man's game, we lost focus of our game. And so in that transition, we looked at what were the issues that we had. We were playing lots of people's games that we were not talented in. And that lost focus of the one game that we were extremely talented in. And also at this time, you'll recognize this, especially being in your line of work, Isaiah. Our average ticket, our average customer revenue per month was, I think it was like $45 or $50 a month. And you can't service a client really well with those few dollars. So we shifted and pivoted, and we said, what matches the same thing that we do, but with higher revenues? And that's when we got into working with realtors. The hardest thing for a realtor turned out to be the easiest thing for us, and that is, how do you find a seller? Okay.
Yeah, I think this is powerful. This is powerful too, because it's funny how the same every interview I've done so far, there's been some really like reoccurring themes, and one of them is kind of related to what you're talking about, is that you really hyper focusing on what you do well, and what I would call find a niche and dominate the niche.
Right.
Right. And you just spoke to, like, sellers can be that opportunity. Then there's sub niches, right? Or subcategories within a niche that you can go after. What I find is so many people are going after too many things. They're trying to do, and they don't have the team to support it. Right. So like, it's one thing if you have a team and you can have 20 or 50 different lead gen sources or whatever it may be. But I think that sometimes people don't realize where they're at in their business. And especially when you're going through transition, whether you're big or small, it's, I think that's such great wisdom, is to look at what's working, look at what's not working, simplify, hyper focus, and dominate. So I think that's such powerful advice.
talking about that hyper focus, and I'll give a plug unless you don't want me to, but we do
No.
a podcast called Get Sellers Calling You.
Yeah.
And I interviewed my friend Stuart just recently, and we're talking about niche marketing. And I was asking him, it's very few times that you'll ever catch me speechless on anything marketing related. But I was asking him, and I said, Stuart, if I were a real estate agent and I put the same amount of effort, just kind of general marketing of my business versus in a niche, what type of difference would it make, if any? And he said, minimum is 3 times. On average, it's 5 and 6. He says, I've had it as much as 11. And my
Wow.
jaw dropped because I wasn't expecting that. But that's what you're talking about, being hyper focused in one niche. And the minimum ROI is 300% over just being a generalist.
Yep. And we can go through all the reasons why, but I hope people understand, and that just hits home with people just on a very high level. The reasons why are because the consumers' expectations have changed. Trust in the industry is at an all-time low, and there's more competition than ever before. And so having this rifle approach where you pierce a niche is so critical compared to the shotgun approach to making sure that you have the success that you want to have. And I think that Beatty, literally I've done 4 of these in this series so far, and it's come out differently. But what's so exciting is it's like another agent told me when they were making their comeback is they found a niche and they dominated the niche on their comeback. And like it's similar story. So I just think that's so cool. That's so cool.
What's interesting, this is the thing that I've learned, and I learned this from a guy named Jay Abraham, if that name rings a bell.
Oh yeah, he's one of my favorites.
He made a comment that when you look at business as a whole, and real estate sales is a business, okay?
Yep.
When you look at business as a whole, they're the same patterns. Everyone thinks that their business is uniquely different, but it's not. It's the same foundational patterns, right?
Yeah.
You lay the same pad for your foundation. You may frame the house differently, but the framing construction is always the same, and it's those patterns that you're picking up. And I think it's so cool. Hopefully all your listeners will pick up the pattern and go, okay, well, this isn't as hard as I thought it was.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love it. Next question for you. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? What would you consider yourself?
I'm so much of an introvert. On our 20-year high school reunion, my wife and I are in the same class. I'm walking down this hall. I see a friend I recognize, so I turn the other way and go find a chair to sit down so I don't have to talk.
I love it. One of the things people don't realize is there's a lot of introverts in real estate. And I think that he's becoming a good friend. His name is Barry Jenkins. And he actually has a book called Too Nice for Sales. And he's speaking to the introverted real estate agents and how they can actually use that as a benefit. Because one of the things about introverts is if you study the profile of introvert, they more naturally have a trusting personality because they don't trust as much.
That's very interesting. Very insightful.
And there's we could go down we could go down a rabbit hole in this topic alone, but talk a little bit about how you've been able to use your strengths as an introvert in business. Would you feel like, how has that manifested itself into turning your personality trait into a strength?
It's been a struggle. And I've had to reckon with a very simple concept. The Lord made me this way, and therefore there's a path for how I build a business that's different. One of my friends is sort of like you, probably more so. He's high D, high ADD, and he has probably 20 plates spinning at one time. He has multiple businesses involved with all these ministries. And it just wears me out seeing his level of complexity in his life. And so when, in fact, I have to tell you a story. even watching you. So we started to build up a sales team. I'm going to be like Isaiah. Okay. Not a chance. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Too much complex. So I've learned that for me, I have to build within my strengths. And by being that introvert, by being that person that narrows in on a few things, I've been able to become exceptionally good in one thing.
Yep.
But my life is easy, and I just build it around that one thing and duplicate it out. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And it's so important for people to hear because whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, there's positives and negatives to every personality. And I don't want to use the word negative as even being like negative, but things you might have to try to overcome. One of the biggest things I've seen with introverts is they feel like they have to become somebody else because they hear the loud noise of an extrovert, and then they feel inadequate, or they feel like they have to adjust or do something that the extrovert is doing, and then they can just kind of destroy themselves or defeat themselves in the process. And so I think what's such great wisdom is what you just said, is God made you how you are, and working and finding a way to build the business around who you are. And there's so many real estate agents in today's market that are struggling with that concept. You're trying to be somebody you're not.
You know, I just taught a Bible study on this. I won't tell you the Bible study, but the little children's story I used up front. You have this eagle eagle egg that the farmer puts underneath the hen, and the eagle grows up thinking he's a chicken, and life is horrible. You know, everyone mocks him, ridicules him, because he's trying to be someone that he's not. And once he realizes he's an eagle and he starts to fly like an eagle, then everything smooths out. And that, I think, especially for those introverts of us, you have to really figure out, you know, what you're good at and just focus on that, and don't try to be like Isaiah Colton, right? Don't try to be someone that you're not, but flourish where you've been planted.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. And one of the reasons why I love Barry's book is because he gives examples of how you can communicate with influence as an introvert. Because the reality in business, you still have to do certain things, right? So, but when you try to use the patterns of somebody that's opposite of your personality, that's where the conflict kind of comes in. And the other thing that I've learned too is extroverts, if you're an introvert, extroverts have so many problems too. So many problems. And like for me personally, I have, you know, with it, you know, if you're a driver, what happens is you don't even realize it, but you're actually offending a lot of people and you don't even know it. And so you can be going so fast, you're blowing everybody else out of the water. And in that process, you can miss a lot of important details that that can end up really hurting you and hurting your business. So whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, the message is that, you know, I think that within this topic, why I asked that question is you just got to learn to work with your strengths and mitigate against your weaknesses. And I look at great entrepreneurs, great real estate professionals. That's what they do. They surround themselves with people. They focus on their core strength. And then as they develop the cash flow and the business continues to grow with them focusing on their core strength, when they go to try to expand outside of that, they learn enough to be dangerous, but then they find a way to partner with people that complement them. And that's something that I've been, you know, that I've recently learned. This is the official podcast. I haven't announced this yet, but I'm actually going to be stepping down as the CEO/COO of Real Estate Nexus. And that's a big decision for me. But I found somebody who is a better operator than I am. And sometimes you just have to be willing to say, hey, maybe there's somebody that's better at this than I am, you know? And so we could keep going on this topic, but I think if you're listening to this, in today's market, you can't afford especially when you go through a market shift, you can't afford to be second guessing yourself. And so I don't want you guys to do that. I want you guys to feel great about who you are, how God has made you, and work within your God-given strengths. I think it's so important. Anything you want to add to that?
Life is so much easier and so much more peaceful when you work within the strengths that the Lord has given you than try to be someone that you're not.
Yeah, that's powerful. So when it comes to marketing, and particularly within your space of postcard marketing, what do you think one of the biggest myths are when it comes to offline marketing or postcard marketing? I know it's a kind of an off the wall question, but I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to postcard marketing.
I think the big answer is, in all marketing, postcard especially, is you think that because you send out a postcard or you send out an ad that you've marketed. You haven't.
Right.
If you think about that pay-per-click ad or that email or that postcard, all it is a delivery vehicle, and it delivers a message. And if it's delivering a wrong message, it's not going to work. And you've got to understand who your audience is. And here's something that blows your mind, for postcard especially. If I'm doing geographic farming, who's my audience? Most of them have no interest in selling. Only a few of them have an interest. And so I've got to learn how to do a message that appeals to those not interested in selling and simultaneously appeals to those who are interested if I want to maximize the results. And most people just think, hey, I sent out a postcard. It didn't work. In fact, I got on my desk over here all the postcards I get at my home. I live in a very nice neighborhood, and I rarely get a postcard from an agent twice. Why? Well, if it worked for them the first time, they would have sent it out again. Okay. So they don't know what they're doing. And it's kind of humorous, but that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah. And I think that just like anything that's worthwhile doing, it requires, I hear you loud and clear as far as messaging goes, right? It's also consistency, right?
We have a headline on one of our cards I stole from a friend, and it says, if you think hiring a professional is expensive, try hiring an amateur. And that's what you're trying to say, I think.
Yes, it's really good. So we're coming to the end of this podcast, Beatty. I've really enjoyed our time. I wish we could keep going. I want to kind of end off with just one more question. As far as like throughout your whole experience of serving real estate community, what is a big lesson that you'd like any real estate professional to walk away with during this changing market? Maybe we've already talked about it, but just to kind of end off on that.
Well, I'll borrow the big lesson from my friend that when we were talking about niche marketing and changing markets. And I said, Stuart, you've been through all these different market shifts. What's the key? So the key is just keep doing it. It's not that, he said, I don't care what the market shift is. I just keep getting more listings, because if you have enough listings, he said, when I first met you, Beatty, he said, I was carrying 55 to 60 listings because that's what it took to generate the sales I needed to keep my income up. He said, now I carry 2 or 3 listings because that's what it takes to generate the sales to keep my income up. He said, if the market shifts, just keep doing more of it. I thought that was the simplest advice.
I think it's really powerful wisdom, really powerful. So Beatty, how does somebody check you out, find out? I know you talk about your podcast. Where does somebody go if they want to check you out for postcards?
Postcards, go to agentdominator.com. Our postcards, we produce 10 times greater results than standard real estate postcards. We guarantee them. If you want just some great training, in addition to this podcast, you can go to our podcast channel, Get Sellers Calling You, both on YouTube or on any podcast player.
I check it out from a distance once in a while. It's really, really good. So I definitely check that out. Beatty, thanks so much for hopping on here today. I've enjoyed our conversation, and so I think we pulled out some really good really good wisdom for anyone who's listening. And I hope that if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you're starting to see a trend and hear a trend. And if you are looking for a streamlined way to build your digital blueprint, or your footprint, and you want to do it with ease and not have to be a techie to be able to do it and be able to launch listing campaigns and marketing campaigns, you can go to renfreetrial.com and you can actually sign up for a 14-day free trial. And in 10 minutes or less, you can have your first campaign up and running to market your listings and start generating seller leads. So with that, thank you again, Beatty. And I hope to talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Can I have one plug to that?
Yeah, please.
Not all seller leads convert immediately. So that's where you need postcard marketing to keep nurturing them over time. And that's where.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, actually, because that's why we love working with Beatty, because the marketing it complements. So you definitely, there's got to be a strategic follow-up strategy. It's all about consistency. So I'm glad you did. Check us out, and we'll see you in the next podcast.